most of us that, and I'm not saying this was connected in any way with my call to your office, that you had announced your resignation yesterday, especially when you were reported as saying very forcefully that you had done nothing wrong. We've read your resignation statement, we have a copy with us. Why did you resign, bearing in mind the fact that you believe you've done absolutely nothing wrong in this case?
Thank you for those kind words to start with, Mr. Vaz. I felt, as I said in my statement, that this has already become a huge distraction, in the same way the Commissioner described, a huge distraction for me in my current role. I looked at the last 2 weeks in terms of my role as the head of counter-terrorism. I probably spent no more than 2 or 3 hours managing that level of risk. I see no indication at any time, either now, in the future, and for some considerable period, that pressure will subside. Point one, huge distraction. Point two, I think occasionally leaders have got to stand up and be counted. I've said I'm accountable for what's taken place on my watch. I firmly believe, and I'll reiterate that, I have done nothing wrong. My integrity is intact and my conscience is clear. But it is time to stand up and be counted, and that's what I've done. So I've announced my intention to resign.
Thank you. We're just going to re-examine you on 2 issues, one that has recently come since your last evidence to us, obviously about the 9th of July investigation. But could I start with some very interesting evidence we've heard from Mr. Fedocchio concerning the employment of Mr. Walsh, who has just told us, and this is obviously in the public domain, and perhaps one of the reasons why you felt that there were these allegations swirling around that caused you to be distracted, that he decided to employ Mr. Wallace because of your reference, that he went to you and that you had said that he was someone who should be employed. Basically, you did due diligence, that having conducted an investigation into the news of the world, you were the best person to decide on these matters, and that as a result of what you have said to him, and these were his exact words, I'm afraid I don't have a copy for you because obviously it's not been written down, but I can send you the transcript. That's why he took him on, that if you had raised any concerns whatsoever, he would not have employed him in the Metropolitan Police. What do you say to that?
I think that's a... I didn't hear Mr. Fedocchio's evidence.
No, I accept that.
I think that's slightly over-egging the pudding, to put it mildly. I did what I considered, and it wasn't due diligence in the due diligence sense, I sought assurances of Mr. Wallace before the contract was let, to the effect, and I've got a note, I can read it from you if you like, is there anything in the matters that Nick Davis is still chasing and still reporting on that could at any stage embarrass you, Mr. Wallace, me, the Commissioner, or the Metropolitan Police? And I received categorical assurances that was the case. That's not due diligence. Due diligence is in the proper letting of a contract. I had absolutely nothing to do with that. I had nothing to do with the tendering process. That was a matter for Mr. Fedocchio, a matter for him to do. So it was prior to anything happened in that sense. I made a contemporaneous record of it because I thought it was relevant. It's a very short record. I'm very happy to provide that to the committee. And that was it. So that's not due diligence, and it's certainly not a recommendation. I absolutely know, because I've seen it happen in the Met on several occasions in the past 5 years, the letting of contracts is an extremely sensitive issue, and I wouldn't touch it or go anywhere near it in a million years.
But obviously, again, you have not seen what he said, and you've obviously not heard what he said because you were outside, but he was pretty emphatic that he relied on your integrity, and that is why Mr. Wallace ended up getting this job. If you had raised a scintilla of concern, even the slightest concern, he left us with the impression that Mr. Wallace would not have had this contract.
Well, I didn't have a scintilla of concern in 2009.
But you didn't raise any concerns?
I didn't raise any concerns because I didn't have a scintilla of concerns, your quote, in 2009.
And in respect of the other matter that's in the public domain, which is the employment of Mr. Wallace's daughter, did you have anything to do with that?
I'm very happy to answer questions about this, even though it is a matter that's been referred to the IPCC. I'm very happy to be completely open with the committee.
Please.
Again, I've done nothing wrong. I was a postbox. I was a postbox for a CV from Mr. Wallace's daughter, where I've made some notes in an email. Again, very happy to give the committee the email, which gives a completely equivocal interest in whether she gets employment or not. I pass on that email and the CV to the Director of Human Resources, HR, in the Met. Thereafter, I don't know what's happened to it. And it happens all the time. You know, I know numbers of members of Parliament employ friends, family, and all those issues. So it is just, you know, in 2000, bear in mind this was January 2009. Right. I think that's a very important point. I wasn't in charge of specialist operations, had nothing to do with phone hacking, I'd never touched it, and I simply acted as a postbox for an application.
So you can categorically deny to this committee that you, in inverted commas, secured this job for Mr. Wallace's daughter?
Absolutely, categorically denied, and the facts speak for themselves. It is simply, there's one email from me, and I've even said in the email that please let me know, Director of HR, what the position is so I can manage expectations. As in, I'm completely equivocal whether this individual gets the job or not. The Met employs people all the time. We had massive IT projects we wanted short-term staff on. That's what we did. And I had absolutely nothing to do with her employment. I was simply a postbox.
Dr. Hubbard.
Thank you. The evidence you've clearly missed is just stunning, and your name seems to come up quite a few times. Firstly, how close were you to Mr. Wallace? We've heard you were close friends since '98. Is that right?
Again, I've been described as close friends. I became friends with him. I first met Mr. Wallace, I don't think it was 1998, whenever I was staff officer to the Commissioner, which I think was 2000. I met him once then. I must have met him in the next sort of 5 to 6 years, 2 or 3 times per year, if that. Mostly in the company of others, but occasionally on our own. I think some of those are declared anyway in the hospitality register. I would see Mr. Wallace, I reckon, because I have given this some thought, because I have been described as, you know, I do not go round to his house on a regular basis. I must have been around there once to pick him up to go to a football match. It's mostly sport related with other people. I would see him 2 or 3 times a year. Now that's, you know, he's a friend.
Okay.
Yeah, but I can't be clearer. But I think I've been, you know, if Mr. Wallace has done something wrong, let me be absolutely clear.
You're telling this committee he is a friend of yours.
Yeah. He's a friend, and I've been open with this committee.
We accept that he's a friend of yours.
Yes, but don't get the impression that we are the bosom buddies living in each other's houses, because that's just not the case, and he would never describe it.
We understand that. We
Thank you.
Get the message. Yes, Dr. Hubbard.
But I'm also shocked by what you just said about employment practices within the Met. You said it happens all the time. Does it really happen all the time that an assistant commissioner passes a CV on to the Director of Human Resources? A big organisation like the Met surely has procedures for how people are hired.
It has formal procedures.
Are you really telling this committee that you didn't think that you sending that would make any difference to this person's chance of getting a job?
Well, the Director of HR, as was then, if you knew him, you would know that he would absolutely say, if there was anything improper about this, and he actually said so in an email to me, he would have aborted the process forthwith. He was that sort of person. So I know, in passing it to that individual, the matter will be dealt with entirely appropriately, with complete probity, and in the proper way. Now, the Metropolitan Police turns over a huge amount of staff. They want people for 2 weeks here, 3 weeks there, a month there, a month there. It's quite a useful way of getting people into your employment on these short-term bases. There are numerous examples from numerous senior people, both within the Metropolitan Police and the Metropolitan Police Authority, where people who are known to those people have been employed on a short-term basis, and some have even become permanent employees in the future. So it's not unusual.
And do you think that is a way that a public body ought to be behaving, that it relies on that personal connection?
No, it doesn't.
You just described it as a regular way of getting people in for 2 weeks here, 3 weeks there. What about the people who don't know a commissioner?
We are turning over a huge amount of staff. There are clearly normal processes that happen and go through. But occasionally, and I'm sure it happens in the House of Commons, that you will bring people in to work for you for a short period placement with you on a regular basis. The facts that...
Before we proceed further, with Ms. Phillips, can I just ask you, something was raised by Sir Paul about his non-disclosure to the Prime Minister about the arrest of the contract that Mr. Wallace had with the Metropolitan Police, and he referred to an official at number 10 saying to you, or you saying to the official, that the Prime Minister should be protected from such information. Is there such an official? If there is, who is this official who wanted everyone to keep this information away from the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary? Who was trying to protect the Prime Minister?
Well, officials will always try and protect their principles from these type of things, and there are very rare occasions when the Prime Minister will be briefed about operational matters, mostly around national security and counter-terrorism. So
was there a decision not to tell him about Mr. Wallace?
There was an offer in the early part of September 2010 for me to put into context some of the nuances around police language in terms of what a scoping is, what an assessment is, what a launching investigation is.
An offer to whom? An
offer to a senior official within Number 10 to say, should that be desirable, I'm prepared to do it.
Who is that official?
The official is the Chief of Staff.
Ed Llewellyn?
Yes. Yeah.
You made an offer to him to brief him fully on these issues?
No, I did not say that.
No, but please tell me.
No, I said I offered to brief on the nuances.
The nuances.
Of what a scoping was. It was the New York Times issue. And people say, you're launching an investigation. No,
we understand.
So, yeah. But it is not well understood, as the word review is not well understood, around these nuances. So it was simply an offer to explain what scoping meant, what it could lead to.
And what happened to that offer?
The offer was properly and understandably rejected.
So there was no question of not telling the Prime Minister for operational matters about Mr. Wallace?
No, I wouldn't have disclosed any operational matters about this. It is the very rare occasions that the PM would be briefed on operational matters, and it would be something catastrophic around national security or something of huge public concern, which this wasn't at that stage, don't forget. So it was simply to explain, it was an offer to explain police protocol.
I understand. But you didn't seek to tell the Mayor of London or the Home Secretary that there was somebody who worked for the Metropolitan Police who you knew as a friend, a close friend, whatever, who was formerly the deputy editor of the News of the World. You felt that was an operational matter.
It just wouldn't be. No, I mean, it just wouldn't be my place to do it. He was working. To Dick Fedorcio predominantly
yes.
For the reasons that I know you had explained to you regarding his deputy's illness. There was some brief support for me as well. Responsibility to brief.
Thank you.
Those.
I accept that. Thank you. David Winnick.
When we had the previous witness before us, the Director of Public Affairs, we asked him, in effect, if questions had been asked about Mr. Wallace prior to the appointment being made over phone hacking. He said no, because in effect this has all been cleared by you. That's the situation, is it?
I think hopefully my earlier answer explained it. What I did was not due diligence in the truest sense. Once it goes into a letting and procurement process, there's a very, very clear process that is undergone. Part of that, I suspect, is proper due diligence, as opposed to me seeking personal assurances that there was nothing untoward. And then, let's not forget, Mr. Wallace is an innocent man still, and we have no way of knowing what comes out in the future. But it was my way. As I say, I'll provide you with the memo. You won't be able to read my writing, so I'll type it for you. But it was a simple, contemporaneous note recorded in my daybook that say, record of a phone conversation, sought assurances, and it is simple as that.
What's not quite simple, at least to me, is that phone hacking had been much in the news. Investigations had taken place. You decided in 2009, was it not so, Mr. Yates, not to continue with the investigation, am I right?
In 2009, I didn't reopen an investigation.
Yeah, and you described it to a newspaper as a crap investigation?
I described it as a, you used the word, decision in the light of what I now know since News International.
And yet, in 2000...
Can I just finish my point?
Yes.
In the light of what I now know. If I had known then what I know now, and the facts appear to be that News International have deliberately covered up, I would have made a completely different decision, and none of us would be where we are today.
But bearing in mind that two people had been sent to prison prior to 2009 for phone hacking, convicted, the News of the World was very much in the news as the paper that they worked for, supplied the information as a result of phone hacking. Doesn't it seem to you very strange